Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I want to share with you guys 20 EDC folding knives that I truly believe everybody should try at least once. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that I have over 300 pocket knives in my personal collection. I also have over 4,500 uploads on YouTube. I have handled a lot of stuff. It goes without saying that there is a lot of stuff that I would not recommend to the average person, including the vast majority of my own collection. However, I definitely have some knives that I would recommend pretty much anybody check out. There's going to be knives on this list that don't cost very much money at all, and there's going to be knives on this list that cost a lot of money, but wherever you are in your knife journey, these knives are, if you get the opportunity, definitely knives that you should check out because they could be one and done, meaning the one knife that does it for you forever. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. I'll link everything down in the description so that you guys can check it out if you want to. Let's go ahead and get started. Starting off here with number 20, this is an obvious one, especially if you watch my channel a lot because I talk about it all the time. This is the $65 Vosteed Raccoon, which is great for 14C28N blade steel, and we have the micarta scales. Comes in a wide variety of different configurations and colors, but most importantly, the locking system. This is a button-operated compression lock or top liner lock, which is substantially stronger than your average plunge lock and even a lot stronger than your average liner lock. This is just phenomenal for the money. I mean, if you're looking for a good, straightforward utilitarian cutting tool that is nice and tough, has good cutting geometry, this is the way to go. It's just really, really good. Moving on here to a much more expensive one, number 19, that's going to be the Pyrotek Kraken. I love this knife. Now, this is S90V. In this case, we have the DLC coating, which is really cool. We have titanium. We also have a really shiny special one that's zirconium, but that's a whole different story. These come in at $300, but what makes them really cool is it's essentially like the Chris Reeve Sabenza and the Benchmade 940, but better than both. The magic of this knife is the fact that these scales are very easy to take off. This is also the filler tab for the pocket clip if you want to switch it around. But they come off so you have easy access to the internals for cleaning or disassembly. And then putting it back on is as simple. I'm not going to try and fit that filler tab back in there. It's as simple as popping these back on and just going for it. This is so good, and the magnets are strong enough to keep the scales on. There's a ton of people who watch my content who have these knives and have been using them, and they're just phenomenal. They're easy to take the scales off, but it's not easy for them to come off on their own, and they also don't have rattly play or anything in the scales. It's just a phenomenal design. If you're in the territory where you're looking to spend a lot of money on a really good knife, number one, S90V is incredible, especially when it's heat treated properly. Pyrotek tends to get it on the higher end, which makes the edge retention absolutely amazing on these knives. They also come with cards telling you the exact HRC of the blade. The DLC coating is fantastic, adds additional corrosion resistance which S90V does not need, but it makes it even better. And then it also makes it incredibly scratch resistant. These are wonderful EDC knives, very, very premium, very expensive, but they're one of those knives where if you spend $300 on it, it really feels like you got $300 worth of pocket knife. These are absolutely excellent. If you want to spend more money and get something special, you can, but honestly, I just go with the base version. Moving on here to number 18, this is one that's really going to surprise some people, and I want to explain myself. Let me explain. This is the Open L8. But Metal Complex, you don't like that knife. You're right. I personally don't like that knife, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't recommend that people try it. There's nothing I can do about the legacy of this knife. It simply is, and it's there for a reason. This is an inexpensive, extremely utilitarian, lightweight folding knife. I don't like the fact that it's slow and not fidgety and modern and tactical and all that. I don't like that it's a big wood cork. I don't like that it doesn't have a pocket clip, but the price on it, depending on when you're buying it, is anywhere from $10 to $16. These things can slice. They might not be the newest, coolest thing, but they do work. The people who argue for the Open L are correct. For people who don't need anything more than this, this is one of your best options. It has incredible cutting geometry. Doesn't have anything special for the blade steel, but the geometry is phenomenal. It will cut and cut and cut, and honestly, it is a comfortable cutting tool. It has this little ring lock, which is specific to the Opinel and maybe some other collaborative stuff, but truthfully, it is a knife that people should try, because even though I say that I don't like it, there are plenty, tens of thousands of people who would say, I tried it and it's the only knife that I carry. So, should you try it? Absolutely. If you get the opportunity, this is one of the easier ones, obviously, because it's so much less expensive. If you get the opportunity, try it. You might love it. It might be the only knife that you ever need. Moving on here to number 17. We have the Demco 80-20.5. There's a few different versions of this. What's so special about this knife? This knife is essentially a cold steel triad lock that is substantially easier to manipulate. Very few people have not heard of this. If you don't know, Andrew Demco invented the triad lock. He also invented the shark lock, which is what you're seeing here. This has the strength of the triad lock. It's just way easier to manipulate, and it is completely and totally ambidextrous like the triad lock. The 80-20.5 is substantially less expensive than the full USA version, which is the 80-20. This is also much easier to get your hands on. You can get these knives for anywhere from $120 to $400 if you want something, super special with the titanium. Honestly, go to Blade HQ and get the one that's $120 in 20 CV. That is a spectacular deal. This is definitely the definition of a one and done knife. This knife should essentially last forever. The locking system is so incredibly strong. One of the only downsides is taking this thing apart means that you're going to have to risk. And if you've taken this knife apart, that you know there's a spring in there that's housed inside of the shark lock mechanism. And if you don't have something covering this thing up, the spring will shoot across the room and you will lose it forever. How do I know? Because that actually happened to me. I didn't lose it forever. I did end up finding it. You can get these in the shark's foot, which is what you're seeing here. Anywhere from, the AUS 10A, 20 CV. You can get it in 3V, probably S35 VN, maybe even LMAX. I can't remember all the different steels they use. They're all great. This is a phenomenal knife. Definitely something that you could buy once and then be done with it. Moving on here, we're going to group these two together. This is an obvious one. Number 16, we got to talk about the Spyderco Para 3 and the PM2. The knife that I have probably carried more than any other knife in my collection is this Para 3, or really the Para 3 in general, because this is not the only Para 3 that I have owned. These knives are notorious for being called ugly, and that is definitely accurate. These are not winning any beauty contests in the knife world. They look like dead. They look like roadkill, like birds that have been recently run over by a large pickup truck. But they are functional. A lot of people say, I just can't bring myself to buy one of those ugly Spyderco knives that are so weird. I was in the exact same boat. I say it all the time. The fact is, they work phenomenally. These are such incredible EDC knives. They are American made, and Spyderco has gotten a lot out of control with their pricing over the years. The Para 3 lightweight can still be found for $133, which isn't bad. It's not the most phenomenal version of the knife, but these definitely go all the way up to $265 plus, closer to $300 depending on the version that you get. The PM2 at base is in S45EN, which is great, but it's up there just shy of $200. Either way, if you can choke down that price tag, the truth is that these are phenomenal tools, and you will rarely get somebody arguing whether or not they are a good tool. Spyderco has incredible cutting geometry, incredible ease of manipulation. They are the fathers of the compression lock, the original fathers of the compression lock. So the locking systems are really strong on these knives. They also have, if I didn't say, incredible heat treats and cutting geometry. So your cutting performance, no matter what steel you get, is going to be really, really good. If you get the opportunity, try it. You might be like me and thousands of other people who change their minds immediately right after holding and using these things. They are really, really good. Moving on here, a knife that's not going to be available for everybody given the nature of it. Number 15, that's the Guardian Tactical Recon 35. This is an American double action OTF. It is a switchblade by definition, so depending on where you live, it might be completely illegal. If it's legal in your area, I highly recommend you check this out. This is a spectacular OTF, mainly the size of this knife, the compact nature in general. This is a wonderful size. OTFs are, to people who don't know any better, scary weapons. But the truth is they're phenomenal and convenient cutting tools. Push up on the switch, the blade deploys. pull back, and it retracts into the handle. It is arguably the easiest knife to manipulate, the most straightforward, get it out, use it, put it away, and you're done type of knife. It also takes very deliberate force to deploy, so essentially no risk of the thing going off in your pocket. I've never had that happen. The reason the Guardian Tactical Recon 35 is so recommendable is because it operates via a bearing switch. There's a steel plate under here, some ball bearings. This makes the switch incredibly easy to manipulate. One of the biggest complaints with a lot of these American OTFs is that they are so hard to deploy and retract. Some of the older Microtechs were that way, not with this. Anybody can do this. This is such a good tool. They've gone up just a little bit in price over the years. These are now about $300. You can also go with the Guardian Scout, which is slightly smaller for about $275. Either way, these are a prime example of, spending a little bit more money definitely gets you something special, and I highly recommend these, right? If you're going to spend that much money even one time and you're interested in OTFs, this is probably the one to go with. Moving on here, number 14. Some people are going to agree, some people are going to disagree, but the ProTech Malibu is kind of a legendary knife. It's an extremely legendary knife. This is the knife that set off the button lock craze. And I gotta admit, as many button lock knives as I have handled on this channel, thinking back, I've reviewed roughly 10 kajabillion button lock knives. This is the one that set it off. And even with all of the button lock knives that I've handled, I gotta admit, there is there's something still very special about the ProTech Malibu. This one has the diamond texturing on it, the all black, right, 20 CV. I think they come in Magna Cut now, but it's just like that perfect EDC knife. It's not a hard use knife. It's not something that is, overly specific in terms of use, but it has a really good blade shape. It's got really good handle ergonomics. It's just got a nice straightforward look. It's also American made, which is very, very important to a lot of people who watch my channel, and they still come in at $225. There's something to be said about the ProTech company in general. They are definitely one of the best American companies on the market. Throw a rock in any direction on the knife world internet, ask the person it hits. Number one, they're going to be mad because you threw a rock at them. But once they get over that, they'll tell you that ProTech is a really, really great company. I highly recommend you check it out. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe it is. But for a lot of people, this is the one EDC knife, right? Moving on here, another obvious one that I talk about way too much. I'm going to talk about it again today. Number 13, that's the Civivi Vision FG. Or if you want to be fancy, you can get the WE Titanium N20 CV. I think that's what they still use, Vision R. This is the Snex created knife. He invented the Super Lock, which operates very similarly to the Shark Lock on the spine. It's also incredibly strong on both of these variations. The only thing I really don't like about the titanium version, like if you love titanium and 20 CV, it's definitely more premium. It's going to cost a lot more money. It's the positioning of the pocket clip. This is really weird. It's not a deal breaker for everybody, but it is for some people. The Vision FG is the Civivi version, and you can get this knife for $78. I think the Vision R is about $269. This guy is Nitro V, which is a wonderful steel. And then your choice of micarta or G10. In this case, we have the clear, I just call it guitar pick material, whatever you want. You can get Ultim if you want. This thing is so unbelievably good. I have said since I handled this that it's probably the best dollar for dollar knife in existence when you consider the materials, the craftsmanship, or in this case, the manufacturing quality, and the strength of the locking system. It's really, really hard to beat this knife on all fronts for $78. It is stupidly recommendable. The one thing that people are bothered by is the overall appearance and mostly the holes in the handle. If you don't care about this knife, if you don't care about the holes in the handle, buy it. You'll be happy. I promise. $78. It's really hard to beat this thing. It's so good. Unbelievably fidgety, easy to manipulate, all of that. Just a wonderful pocket knife all the way around. Moving on here to number 12, also kind of an obvious one and one that pretty much everybody has heard of at this point. This is the Riot XO. Now these come in a wide variety of configurations. This is the XOM, that means the medium-sized one. That's the one that I think is the best for EDC. You can get the standard little box cutter one for like 75 bucks. It's smaller and it takes a little replaceable razor blades. Those are cool, they're fine, they'll scratch the itch if you just want the gravity thing, right? If I didn't mention, this is a gravity knife, meaning there's no pivot, there's no springs or anything like that. And honestly, what's responsible for locking the blade out is pretty strong. You can see these two pill-shaped pieces of steel on either side. that are completely encased by, in this case, the aluminum frame, or in this case, a titanium frame. The best versions of these knives lock. You can get a bigger one if you want to, the original. It's much bigger. I find that the medium-sized ones are the best for EDC, and specifically this aluminum one. It's lighter weight, arguably is no less strong, right, or less capable. And the medium one, if you can find it, in 154 cm is 129, or in LMAX is 159. That is a ridiculous deal considering these are made by Riyadh. These look gimmicky to a lot of people, but if you ask anybody who's actually EDC'd them, including myself, this one right here, this titanium one, I EDC'd for a long time, they are stupidly easy to manipulate and use. They are wonderfully compact. I've really enjoyed, despite this one being two-tone, not my favorite. This is one Blade HQ sent me, but man, this thing is so good for EDC. I really, really like it. It's also not difficult to take apart if you really want to, but highly recommendable, whether you go with the inexpensive one or the super expensive one. The Riyadh EXO, again, if you can legally carry a gravity knife, and this one in particular being a double ground or a dagger ground blade, right, and a gravity knife, that's going to be super illegal in some places, so check your local laws. But very, very convenient, and honestly a very safe pocket knife to manipulate. I love these switches, especially this one here with the magnetic system. That is really cool. Highly recommendable. Again, could be your one and done knife. Moving on here, this one is painful. It's painful to talk about, but it is true. Number 11, we got to talk about the Spyderco Shaman. The newest versions of these knives, the standard versions, are Black G10 and CTS XHP, which I thought was going to be extinct. CTS XHP is a wonderful, wonderful composition. Absolutely. But this knife is the knife that kind of molded my own personal wants and needs when it came to a pocket knife. In particular, the ergonomics. I think the Spyderco Shaman has some of the best ergonomics in existence. It also, of course, has the compression lock, which is wonderful. And these scales, which they refuse to bring back or do any other model with, are almost contoured. They're heavily chamfered, giving that sort of sculpted feel. It just feels so much better in the hand. I don't have the original clip on this guy. I got an MXG deep carry clip. But despite the fact that the Spyderco Shaman has skyrocketed in price to a bizarre $265, I don't like that price, guys. When I bought mine, which this was the original, I just swapped the scales out for green. When I bought this, it had just seen a price bump from 165 to 185, and I had to grit my teeth through 185, right? So, do I love the $265 price tag? No, I do not. Is this a good knife? Oh my God, yes. The Spyderco Shaman is wonderful. It is such an amazing EDC knife. Definitely on the more robust side. It's not going to have the same cutting geometry as something like the Para 3 or the PM2, but I'm telling you, ask anybody who owns this knife and uses it all the time, they'll tell you the same thing. The price is insane. The knife is spectacular. This is a wonderful, wonderful product. It's meant for serious use. Has the phosphor bronze washers just like the PM2 and Para 3, right? Has a really cool look. This is an easier aesthetic to choke down. It's kind of like Spyderco and Strider got together. A lot of people refer to this as the Striderco, and I think that makes a lot of sense. This is a spectacular product. It's just really, really expensive. And moving on here to the halfway point in this list, we have got to talk about the CJRB Pyrite family. This is essential. This is like the quintessential budget button lock knife. Whether you go with the standard in the reverse tanto, the standard in the drop point blade, these are going to have AR RPM 9. You can get the large one. There's even a tiny one. I don't recommend the tiny one, or the new Pyrite Light, which is actually slightly different in overall profile, shape, and length. With the cool, I'm going to call it a sheep's foot blade, right? But the injectable plastic scales. This guy comes in at $30, making it one of the best values on this list, and honestly, in the knife world in general. Very, very much inspired by the popularity and the overall shape and look of the ProTech Malibu. I think CJRB kind of like takes the cake for the best thing that came out of the button lock craze, at least dollar for dollar. These are spectacular. If you're not into any of the fancy stuff or any of the expensive stuff, these don't have exotic materials. They're not going to win any awards for edge retention or just overall like, oh my gosh, it's titanium, it's so shiny. But if you want a good tool, if you want a straightforward tool, you're looking at $30, $50, maybe up to $60, literally between $30 and $60. They operate exactly the way that you'd expect. It's a plunge lock, but as long as you're not doing anything absolutely insane with it, they will serve you well. These are spectacular, spectacular knives. If you don't own one, you should at least try it because you might get it and think, that's it. I don't need anything else. Moving on here to number 9. I talked about Microtech here earlier on the list. We have got to talk about their OTFs. Anybody who has handled a Microtech double action OTF will tell you there is something about this action, there's something about this feel that is different, and they are right. These have that OTF switchblade satisfaction that you imagine in your mind the first time you see one of these things in a movie, right? That click and that sliding sound with the metal on metal. Man, they are unreal. Now, they're super expensive. My favorites, honestly, this is the Combat Troodon that I carry and use, but your Microtech Ultratech is going to be less expensive and not quite as powerful, not quite the same experience. But the Combat Troodon in particular is that full-on USA clickety-clackety hyper-tactical OTF switchblade experience all in one package. These are expensive. USA-made products, $450, all premium materials for sure. The newer ones have a much easier switch to operate. If you guys remember the older Combat Troodons, oh my God, a lot of people had to use 2 hands, right? They sacrificed no power and made it substantially easier to operate. This Combat Troodon has never failed. I have probably fired this thing at least 500 or 600 times. It is wonderful. Drop point blades, tanto blades, double edge blades. You can get every color of the rainbow. You can get 2-tone blades, apocalyptic, whatever you want. $450 seems like a lot of money. The first time I bought this knife was back in 2014, May of 2014. I paid $385. Over 10 years, these things have managed to not really increase in price all that much. And while $450 is a lot of money for a knife, I really feel like you're getting your money's worth. It's one of the most expensive knives on the list, but man, if you're lusting after something, some crazy, this is like that culmination of like knifeness that a lot of people, dream of, being able to handle and use one day. And I can tell you from experience as the owner of multiple Microtechs and somebody who uses multiple Microtechs, it's worth it. The Combat Troodon is absolutely amazing. Moving on here to number 8. If you're into that hardcore, super robust, indestructible sort of end of the knife world, well, it's the Cold Steel Triad Lock. Specifically, though, I think the one that represents it the best is probably the AD10. Why? I think a lot of knives in Cold Steel's line that utilize the Triad Lock are just cartoonishly huge. And if you're all about that life, right? If you've got a Cold Steel Espada XL hanging down half of your jean leg and you can go about your day like that, power to you. I think that's a little bit cumbersome. I would recommend the AD10 if you want the most robustness of the, if you want the best ratio of like strength and ability to carry, ability to manipulate, all of that, and comfort, I think the AD10 is the way to go. Not just the lock in this case, but the knife itself was designed by Andrew Demko. This is a workhorse. Now, I have mine outfitted with Original Goat titanium scales. Original Goat's amazing. They make stuff in the United States. You can find them linked down in the description as well. But the knife is actually incredibly well priced considering it's essentially, not completely, but it's as close to an indestructible folding knife as you're going to get. It really is that strong. The standard ones in, I think it's AUS 10, something like that. The lights are somewhere around $100, and the S35VN versions, which is what I would recommend, about $150. Is it worth it? All day, dollar for dollar, all day. This is a ridiculous tool. If any knife on this list is one and done, it's this one. You could buy this knife, and in 50 years, it'll probably still be completely fine. The edge might be worn down. You may have sharpened it a few times, but essentially the lockup, the way that it operates, it's still going to be great. This is the knife that you take out to use for pretty much anything if you absolutely need it to be a folding knife. Absolutely wonderful. Moving on here, we have to talk about the Kershaw launch, in particular, the Kershaw Launch 16. I know you guys are getting sick of hearing about this knife, but I love this knife. You talk about a side opening automatic knife. I had to include one on the list. If I'm going to do it, a lot of you guys know I'm going to point to the Kershaw Launch Series knives. And honestly, any of those are going to be great. Number 1 through, what are they up to? 20? Almost, right? They always have great materials. They're made in the USA. They've got great firing power, super reliable, but the Launch 16 is that knife. USA, we've got aluminum with the TrackTech inserts and CPM M4. It's really hard to beat this knife in terms of an automatic, a side opening automatic, in terms of an American knife, in terms of all of that combined with manufacturing quality. This knife is really hard to beat at 150 bucks. If you're spending less money, you're likely not getting the same materials. You're likely not getting the same fit and finish, and you're almost certainly not getting a knife that's made in the United States. Kershaw is an excellent company. They've been an excellent company for 50 years, right? But I think the Kershaw Launch 16 is one of their greatest accomplishments. This is a wonderful, wonderful tool. It's a wonderful automatic knife if you can legally own it. It has that full knife look and feel without being over the top or crazy aggressive. Kershaw went through a phase where everything they made was like super tactical, ultra aggressive. The Launch 16 is kind of the best of all the worlds. And for 150 bucks, it's amazing. I mean, the power on this thing is awesome. It looks great. It carries super well. Seriously, hold on to it. I mean, it's really, usually this type of power I expect from a ProTech knife, but here it is in a Kershaw. This is such a stupidly good product. And again, you might buy this thinking, I don't know if I really need a switchblade, and it could be the one for you, right? It's really worth it. Moving on, let's talk about another knife that I would recommend but don't personally love because I have to be fair. That's the Benchmade Bug Out. Now, I know every time we say Benchmade, the first thing that pops into your head is overpriced. You are correct. That is absolutely correct. These knives are too much money for what they are. However, the Benchmade Bug Out is a really good design, right? If I take everything else and push it out of the way, the fact is it's a good knife that works really, really well. The standard version, again, anybody who's been carrying this knife, and its claim to fame, by the way, is being essentially that cookie cutter, quintessential pocket knife looking knife, right? Just knife in the dictionary. But also, it's very, very lightweight and it's very, very thin, making it incredibly carryable in pretty much any situation. It's also got really great cutting geometry. Benchmade is an excellent company with an excellent warranty. Now, some people put a lot of value to this and some people don't. You can think whatever you want. Benchmade really does have an excellent warranty. I mean, if that's really, really important to you, you might look at Benchmade. This is also made in the United States. The reason that I don't love this knife, the base version of it, is because the injection mold plastic scales, which make it incredibly lightweight, which is part of its claim to fame, just feel incredibly cheap. The standard steel on this knife, I believe, is S30V. They may have changed it, but it is an excellent steel, and that's one of the only compositions that was originally made for pocket knives. Benchmade does a really good job with their geometry and heat treat. But those scales, man, I don't love those scales. Some people don't care. I had to outfit mine with titanium, which bumped the knife up to a whopping, let's get the scale out, a whopping 2.9 ounces, which makes no difference to me in terms of weight, but all the difference in the world in terms of the feel. Now, this one in particular is S90V and was customized on their custom shop, so it's wildly different than the base version that you'll get, but the base version of this knife comes in at about 170 bucks. Is that too much money for the Bug Out? Yes. Is the Bug Out a really, really good tool that you should at least try? You can go to any Cabela's and handle this knife, right? You don't have to buy it. Yeah, you definitely should, because you might handle it and go, that works perfectly for me. I'm going to buy it. And if you're happy with it, that's all that matters. Moving on here to a knife that I would recommend far more than the Bug Out, and also a knife that I think everybody should try, and that's the Hogue Deca. Most people are going to agree that the Hogue Deca is the better knife, mainly because it comes in at a very appropriate $140 for the base price, and the base steel is MagnaCut. Furthermore, Hogue does an excellent job heat treating MagnaCut. You're just getting dollar for dollar a much better product that's also made in the USA. Some people don't like the look of the Deca. You don't have to go with the compound Wharncliffe. You can go with a drop point, right? You also don't have to go with the see-through plastic scales. They got a bunch of different versions. In fact, these scales don't even come from Hogue. They come from Original Goat, again. But the Hogue Deca is essentially the same idea without feeling nearly as cheap, nearly as frail. Neither knife is frail, right? They both operate via the crossbar lock, which makes them super duper recommendable in terms of how ambidextrous they are. But it's just all the way around, I think it's a better knife, right? I really like the Hogue Deca. Everything that I like about this bug out that I have made, I like about the Deca, but the Deca just costs way less money, right? Either way, if this is your style of knife, it's one of these that you want to check out. But this is a near perfect EDC knife and very, very lightweight and compact if that's a big deal to you. Moving on, shifting gears to something completely different. I think that this knife absolutely deserves to be on this list, and that is the Kunwu Padre. Why the Kunwu Padre? This has that look. Excuse the spit, sorry. This has that look. What is that look? It's hard for me to explain it, but you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. That Strider, that Microtech Stitch, that CKF Rot Nevo, that look, that sort of tall blade with the big open forward choil, it's got that. It's also got the incredibly comfortable ergonomics. If you are into the combination of titanium and exotic blade materials, in this case, I think one of them is Elmax, the other one is Vanax, which is one of my favorite steels of all time. It's literally the steel that I have, that I'm using on the knife that I designed. Vanax is incredibly similar to MagnaCut, but where it differs is in terms of corrosion resistance. It is even more stainless than MagnaCut. I think slightly less tough, but it has slightly better ability to hold an edge. Did you know that? Vanax is slightly better in terms of edge retention. But anyways, Kunwu offers some of the best dollar for dollar value in terms of production quality and execution for the materials. You will have a hard time finding the combination of textured titanium, a zirconium pivot collar, right? In this case, we have an ambidextrous locking system and a true DLC coating if you want it on steels like Vanax for less than what Kunwu charges. This knife, if you don't need all the fancy whatever, the base price is $219 for the G10 version. In the version that has the ambidextrous locking system, the crossbar locking system, all the way up to $319 for the titanium with the DLC. This knife is fantastic in terms of its blade geometry, its heat treat. Did I mention that Kunwu is one of the gods of heat treat in this industry right now? Holy moly, the knife is incredibly easy to manipulate via the opening hole, the front flipper, right? This version with the crossbar lock in the opening hole. Wonderful, wonderful ergonomics. It has all of that modern, super cool knifeness to it. But it costs less than a lot of the competition that has this look. And they're using materials and doing things that not a lot of other companies are doing right now. It really is, if you're looking in this territory, it really is going after. This is, as far as Kunwu is a company, that's a company that everybody should try. But as far as all of their knives, the one that I recommend everybody checks out is the Padre. Or if you want something smaller, the Compadre, which is the little guy. But yeah, absolutely. Check out Kunwu in general, but man, the Padre is so good. Essentially with the Vanax one, especially with the DLC coated Vanax one, you just don't have to worry about rust. It's just not going to, unless you're like, well, I'm going to be, underneath the ocean for about a month, like in the water. Okay. I mean, you're probably going to die, but your knife at that point will probably also eventually rust. Outside of that, you're good to go. Moving on here, number 3. Yeah, we got to talk about the North Arm Skaha 2. What is it about this knife? A lot of people look at this and think it just looks like such a plain Jane knife. This knife has absolutely impossible action. When I say impossible, I mean the first time you disengage it, you're going to think, what sort of magical force is allowing the blade to drop so freely into the closed position? And what magical force is allowing this detent to fire the blade in a way that I have not yet experienced? I don't know. I don't know what it is that North Arm Knives is doing that's different than everybody else in terms of their bearings and in terms of their detent. But something about this knife feels completely different. Now, that's just the, wow, it feels cool side of it. The cutting geometry and heat treatment of this knife, which is now in MagnaCut, is spectacular. The old ones used to have like the steps and the ridges on the blade, which was cool, but it kind of slowed you down while you're cutting. This new highly reflective finish that they've got on this basically perfect flat ground drop point blade means that this thing is a laser beam. I mean, it is as close to a laser beam as you can get without making it out of something that isn't steel. It also has beautiful ergonomics thanks to fully contoured scales. The craftsmanship all the way around is just spectacular. Pocket clip placement could be a little higher. I don't love wire clips, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't work. The whole thing just works incredibly well. It's clearly a knife that is made in a way that stands above your typical budget production knives. The whole thing just feels like an incredibly serious tool. For a long time, I looked at them and I thought, that is so plain, and it just seems like a knife that costs too much money for elements that I can get for a lot less. Until I got my hands on it, and then I thought, no, this is different. This is crazy different, right? Is it worth spending $300 on this knife? Yeah, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who went ahead and pulled the trigger on this knife who ended up saying, it wasn't really, I just didn't love it. Most people love it because it is so stupidly easy to manipulate. And the feeling of flipping this knife, some of the best action in the industry, period, right? If the flipper action is your thing, the North Arm Skaha 2 is essentially a perfect EDC knife for anybody, unless you have like monstrous hands, right? But normal size hands or smaller, yeah, it's essentially a perfect EDC knife. And incredibly lightweight. You don't have to go with carbon fiber. Your choice of G10 is also available, but just a really, really good tool. Then moving on to the last two here. These are some of the most expensive, but I truly believe that everybody should check these out. When we talk about Chris Reeve knives, if you didn't know, Chris Reeve invented the frame lock. That was originally called the Reeve Integral Lock. If you have a knife that is a frame lock in any way, it doesn't matter if it's titanium or what, that idea came from Chris Reeve, right? So, in a way, I'm saying check out a Chris Reeve knife at some point because they are unique. They're still different. Some people consider them different in a bad way, and some people consider them different in a good way, right? We'll talk about that. But whether it's the new Sebenza, right, or it's the Umnumzan, or it's the Inkosi, I personally would recommend the Umnumzan because I think this is the best knife that Chris Reeve has ever made, and I also think it's one of the best knives in existence. These knives are made for work. They are made for continuous use over decades. That is 100% true. They have huge washers in them. Now, this is the part that makes it for some people and not for others. If you are a super fidgety, modern, knife person, right? If you discovered the knife world sometime in the last 5 years, this probably won't, you might not love this, right? If you need that super smooth bearing action, you might not love this. If you're somebody who doesn't really care about the action, you want something that is incredibly nice, right? And USA made with premium materials, right? Whether you want, this one's S45VN, they also come in Magna Cut, but you want something that is very strong, very durable, ergonomic, and made to be taken out and used with essentially zero maintenance or very, very low maintenance, right? This is it, especially the Umnumzan. I know some people love the Sebenza. The Sebenza is not for me. The Umnumzan is incredible. Not only does it have a look that is only been able to that other companies have attempted to copy, but never truly captured. This knife, actually, the handle of it inspired my design a little bit. I've talked about this before, but it's such an iconic look and has such a rich history in the knife world. And still to this day, despite being $500, still is a legendary knife, and it's hard to get. If you're looking at that and you're like, I don't know, that's a lot of money, right? Number one, the first step is deciding you want one. The second step is finding one because they are still stupidly high in demand. I can't remember the last time that Umnumzans were just hanging out on the shelf for people to buy. People buy these, right? They're a good tool. Do you need to spend $500 to get a good tool? No, you don't. Do you need to spend $500 to get this complete package, this unique Chris Reeve package that really is just not present in any other corner of the knife world? Not exactly this. Yeah, you do. It's not the most comfortable knife to disengage. It's not the most fidgety knife, right? But if you need a knife that you're going to use for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, It needs to be USA, right? It needs to be very easy to disassemble, very friendly to disassemble, right? You want to have a good warranty behind it. You want to have all that. You want to buy a quality product. You want to make one purchase, buy one quality product, have it last that long. Here you go. This is it. These are incredibly recommendable. For people looking to spend that money, you got to try it. You got to find out if it's for you, right? You might not love the action. It's the hydraulic action, as they call it. But Chris Reeve knives, you know, one of the original Holy Trinity, as they call it in the knife world, definitely worth trying at least once. And then finally, the number one knife. You guys probably knew I was going to bring it up. Yeah, I think everybody should try a Hinder XM18. The Hinder XM18s, right? When I say Holy Trinity, I'm referring to Chris Reeve, Rick Hinder, and Mick Strider, right? Specifically the Strider S&G, the Chris Reeve Sabenza, and the Hinder XM18. To this day, these are still incredibly popular, but for people who really want that action, they want all the other stuff I was talking about, but they want the action too, the Hinder, the tri-way pivot system is definitely the way to go. You can swap between nylon washers, phosphor bronze washers, or bearings, which it comes with. You can also essentially build these knives any way you want if you're willing to pay for all the parts. Something to be said for Hinder knives, which I think is very commendable, is after all these years, I can only remember them bumping up in price once. Perhaps at one time there was a military or LEO discount, right? But for general public, I think they at one point went from $400 to $425. And that was over a decade ago. They have stayed at the base price of $425 for that long. Now, I don't love their 20 CV heat treatment, but their S45VN heat treatment, which is 100% the blade steel that you should be going with on these, unless Hinder decides to work with MagnaCut and heat treat it properly. But their heat treat on S45VN, which makes way more sense for this very robust geometry, is definitely the way to go. This is a non-flipper DLT Trading exclusive. They make flippers, they make no choil versions, they make drop point versions, Tanto versions, they make Bowie versions, they make the trailing point versions, they make harpoon Spanto versions, they make Spanto versions, right? You can go with the Stonewash, you can go with the DLC, you can go with the shiny DLC, you can go with the, what do they call, did I say working finish? They got a ton of different finishes on these things. You can also go with any color of scale that you want, the same finish on the lock side. You can go with titanium, you can go with copper, brass, you can take all of the hardware, which is very, very modular, and switch it out. If you're trying to get that that quintessential American ultra high-end production knife look and feel, but you also want it personalized to you, Hinderer is still the number one on the planet for that specifically, right? It's not everybody's first choice. A lot of people handle them and they don't like them. A lot of people handle them and then they collect nothing but Hinder knives. That's what happened to me. I thought, this is a cool knife. This will be my last knife that I'll ever buy, right? I'll buy that knife and I'll be good forever. Well, fast forward, I started a YouTube channel because I was so enthusiastic about this thing. I have owned over 35 Hinderers and grown this channel to 650,000 subscribers. In a lot of ways, the Hinder XM18, which was the knife in my very first upload, is one of the main reasons behind this channel. Whether you love them or you hate them, right? Or you have never handled one, but you have heard people say that they love them or hate them. The truth is, you need to try it because it might be your favorite thing in the whole world. Wow, that was a long video, but I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I really hope that you guys enjoyed. Like I said, I'll link everything down in the description. No promise that it's all available, but hopefully you try something that you haven't tried. Hopefully you find something that you love that you never thought you would love. That was the whole goal with this video. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.